Hello, we are Random Respawn, and this is our game club. Welcome to the discussion. Today's game is going to be The Swapper. I'm Corey Trout.
I'm Marshall Behringer.
I'm Josh Shigani.
And I'm Caleb Jones. I think we've got a pretty interesting episode for you. The Swapper is a great game. If you haven't had a chance to pick it up on Steam, maybe you've watched Josh's playthroughs of it on our YouTube channel. Either way, be prepared. It's going to get real. And probably weird, considering the last time we talked about it, Josh really took it to the next level.
A weird level.
Yes, very true. And also, before we begin, I want to make sure everyone in the audience... Oh, Josh, you silly man.
I'm not going to talk about that, but...
Okay. I just want to make sure everyone in the audience knows that we are possibly going to be talking about some story stuff in the game that happens, so just warning everyone now, there possibly will be spoilers.
There are possibly going to be spoilers.
There will be
spoilers.
There will definitely be spoilers.
100%.
Marshall's talking about a game, so there will be spoilers.
Yeah, this is true. However, given the way that the game kind of plays out, even though we're going to be talking about the spoilers, it's still not really going to make a whole lot of sense unless you've played it, and it really won't ruin the playthrough of the game. It's just kind of an interesting thing about it. But I don't know, where do you guys think we should start with this game?
Definitely gameplay.
Gameplay? I was going to go like art style.
I mean, I feel like that kind of goes into gameplay a little bit, you know what I mean? Because the 2D art style really affects the way that you play the game.
Okay, I like that. So... go ahead, start us, Josh.
All right. Well, like I said, it still is a 2D side scroller. Some people call it the Metrovania thing because there is a lot of backtracking, especially at the end. You have to have a certain amount of orbs, so you'll be doing some backtracking to kind of get to those orbs.
Whoa, there's no backtracking if you did them all while you were progressing.
Yeah,
that's true.
I never had to backtrack.
I never backtracked.
But the first time that I played, I didn't backtrack. Whereas the second time when I kind of did the speed run, since I was thinking of just go fast, I did have to backtrack, and I was really glad that I did, because there are a series throughout the game. Rocks talk to you, and we're kind of getting ahead, not talking about the gameplay, but I just wanted to say this real quickly. Rocks talk to you throughout the game, and the first time you go into the room where you have to have the 180 orbs, or 124, I didn't have the max amount of orbs. The rocks said one thing, but when I had the amount of orbs that I needed, when I went back, the rocks actually changed what they said. And that is the only time in the game that I can think of where the rocks actually changed what they said. And so I was actually kind of glad that I had to backtrack.
That's interesting. I did not know that.
Very interesting.
But it's not, when I say Metrovania in terms of backtracking, it's very easy to backtrack. They don't block you off from any section. Once when you get to a place, you can freely go back and forth as much as you want to. Except for basically the planet, because they
when
originally...
you get to the end?
Well, at the very beginning, you're launched into the planet, and then you take a teleporter to get right back onto the ship Theseus. And then she's freaking out like, hey, man, what the heck? Why are you back here? I thought I launched you out. But the game only has the first thing you pick up is a clone gun, and that makes a clone of yourself, and you can basically put the clone as far away or as close to you as you want. And later on very soon afterwards, you get the swapper gun, which means you can swap bodies with the clones that you create, and you can make up to 4 clones at a time, and that's it. No other game mechanics are introduced. There is technically a gravity mechanic that's introduced where you can flip from the floor to the ceiling, but you have to pass a certain little field, and once when you walk into a room, it basically either makes you go to the floor or the gravity swap is part of the puzzle. But other than that, in terms of what you have, that doesn't change at all. And instead of just adding more things and making puzzles more difficult, I think it's actually harder because you don't get anything new and you have to solve some of these pretty complex puzzles inside the game. And that's really where the game shines, are its puzzles and its atmosphere. You physically don't touch anyone in that entire game except for your clones. And the second you touch your clones disappear. So it's just you in this spaceship and this person that occasionally talks to you, and you reading kind of what happened through these little terminals. And that's really the core gameplay of the Swapper.
Yeah.
There's something that you just said, Josh, that I want to comment on, because this game gets to a philosophical level pretty quick.
Real fast.
Oh, yeah.
And I like
real fast.
I liked how you phrased that the game mechanics don't change. You don't get new guns. It's just you have to. It's basically the puzzles are the culmination of your experience up until then that you learn how to complete the next one. And it's a very cool thing in this game because of the philosophy that we are all just the accumulation of experience of what we've done in the past, and then we move forward. And in a microcosm sort of way, this game is doing that same thing, and it's sort of playing with the theme of, are these clones real people? I mean, we're solving puzzles because we solved all the puzzles before them and built on the experience. So isn't that what life is? I know I'm getting a little deep here starting out, but I think that there are a lot of things in this game that, whether you realize it or not, are pointing towards that one big question of, are these clones people? I mean, they are a physical exact duplicate of you, and if they're good enough to hold your soul when you swap to them, what makes them worth, or what makes you able to just discard them as not being real people?
Right, and in this game, they talk about identity theory a lot, and about how just because technically your mind and your brain are two separate things, Marshall.
No, sorry about that. That's just my dog.
Oh, really? I thought it was your cat.
It's a very large cat then.
But they talk about identity theory a lot and how you do swap clones, but at the same time, a copy of yourself, is that copy really yourself? And not really. It's a copy of what you were, because the second that copy was made, technically it's its own individual person. So
you
really
can't even say that, because you control it physically. Every move that you make, that thing makes as well. And
that's true.
The only different experience is the placement in the room.
Right, but when you get to Chalmers and Dennett at the very end, and they're talking, and they say, are you really yourself? Just copies of copies of copies. And at that point, I mean, how many of yourselves have you killed before you actually lose who you really were at the beginning? And the thing is, you find out that you aren't even really an individual. You are a clone of somebody.
There's the spoiler.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Dun, dun, dun. I feel like with the swapping mechanic specifically, when I was playing it, when I was really getting into the nitty gritty of like all these super in-depth puzzles of having to swap between like all 4 of the different copies that were out there, I kept thinking of The Prestige with Hugh Jackman. And
interesting. Like when he kept making copies of himself.
Yeah,
he would have to kill that one version.
And he had that quip of, he was always afraid of whether or not he'd be the guy backstage standing beside the audience, or he'd end up in the tank and drown.
Right, it changed. He never knew which one was going to be which.
Right, and then they also made a point in the game where they're talking about the identity theory, and they're mentioning, well I know that I am who I am, but because that's what I remember. I don't remember being anybody else. But does that actually prove anything?
It doesn't.
It doesn't, because you're a copy of the previous person.
I think it's worth talking about a little bit more of the game of the rocks, and then Chalmers and the other two, to give the audience a little perspective. Throughout this entire game, you walk across what are basically alien rocks from the world below, the space station you're in. And when you walk in front of them, your screen blurs out, and it's sort of black overlay with words, and it's as if they're telepathically talking to you. And this happens throughout the entire game, and they consider themselves a chain of beings, and you eventually get to the head of these rocks, but they're all sort of individual and sort of one entire entity.
It's essentially a hive mind.
A hive mind, yes. And then
they call the rocks the Watchers.
The Watchers, yes. And then the other sort of character is this Chalmers, who it turns out you're a clone of. But Chalmers, in the end, is 3 minds in one body, because there are 2 test minds that the people who were dying put their souls into, and then Chalmers brought all of them into her mind. So you have
That's technically wrong. You're a scavenger, and you find Chalmers's and Dennett's brain, and it's this scavenger that combines with all 3 of them. So right. Chalmers and a lot of times, a lot of times in the terminals, there'll be conversations that Chalmers and Dennett had between them, and they kind of really have 2 100% different sides of what it means to swap souls and what a soul is and whatnot. But they end up choosing the same option, and that's to switch or to swap their brain or swap their bodies into this little brain that's kind of in this liquid stuff, and that way they can basically live forever, because they had talked about being in these little tubes, or not in little tubes, but in these little chambers for decades and decades, just kind of waiting. And the rocks, they talk about, it's just a rock, but if they can communicate telepathically, then clearly there's some sort of electrical impulses going on inside of the rock. And how is that any different from our brain? So I mean, are we basically just moving rocks? But is a talking rock really an identity of something? And if it isn't, then what makes that any different than the electrical activity that goes on in our mind to make us different?
That kind of brought up something I was thinking about earlier. The spacecraft that you're on it's called the Theseus, correct?
Yeah.
Isn't that the Greek mythology of the guy who has to push that boulder up the cliff that keeps falling down? I can't remember specifically
Google,
if that's
here
the
I
name of it.
come.
Yeah, do that for me, because if it is, then that almost as if gives off the impression to me at least, Theseus is all about what makes us humans. It's just that freedom, that expression to rebel, even though we know what's going to happen with that boulder rolling down the hill, you still do it anyway. And that gives us individuality no matter what. And then taking this idea of individuality, you then have to deal with this hive mind type of rocks and creatures and whatnot. And then including with the swapper, which you could technically say is amalgamation of what the rocks are. You're literally creating yourself within multiple beings, even though technically you still have an individual self. And then it's just, to me, it goes around and around and around in circles of, are you an individual within a hive mind, or is the hive mind a part of an individual? Something like that, if that makes any sense.
I don't think Theseus had anything to do with the rock.
It did not.
Damn it.
Nice try.
Well, good job. We applaud that.
Damn it.
The one thing that I love probably the most about this game, though, is that it gets so deep into this mythology and this story and not mythology, philosophy, but it does so without really any, effort. But there's certainly effort in the design and the way that it's presented, but it's not effort such that it's just story and dialogue crammed down your throat. It is so minimalistic and so reliant on your atmosphere that it's an amazing way to tell a story and to get somebody thinking about these ideas of philosophy. Because like Josh said, it's a very minimalistic platformer of sorts, and there's beautiful, very light music in the background. The atmosphere is
amazing.
It's great, but there's a little bit of music in the background. The interactions between the rocks are not every room. There's one every once in a while, and it's not huge blocks of text. It's just a little bit. Any of the memory terminals that you activate that kind of talk about the people that were on this space station and what they were testing on or what they were doing, their beliefs, they're no more than one screen's worth of words. I don't know how many characters that is, but it's only a couple paragraphs long.
Definitely not a lot.
At most, yeah. And then you occasionally will get bits of the other scavenger who cloned you. You'll get little bits of monologue from her. You never respond, but she talks to you, and it's so minimalistic. Every time there is a rock or there is a memory terminal or a little bit of that audio, you just latch onto it because it's the first time somebody's talking to you. And to me, it's that sense of aloneness that really sinks in the atmosphere of this game. And there's even a couple sections of when you're out in space and it's zero gravity. I think they only do it twice, maybe 3 times.
I think 3.
I think 3. But yeah, it's not a lot.
And the only purpose that it serves is to make you feel more alone, because you don't.
Oh yeah.
There's no reason for it. There's no puzzles around it. There's nothing special you have to activate. There even ends up being ways around those sections, I think, in different parts if you are backtracking. But it just makes you feel alone because you walk out there and all the sound mutes. You're by yourself. You're just kind of floating through space, and you're just there. and it's really, really cool.
I think that leads to the Watchers, the rocks, because
The head rock as well, specifically.
well, the ones that are on the ship, because they come from the planet below, and they talk about being disconnected from the chain, which is their hive mind, and they don't they dislike it so much that they start killing off all of the humans on the ship because they want to return, and so it's sort of they don't want to be alone so much they're willing to, kill for it, or destroy everything around them so that they can try and get back down. And that's pretty much the end goal of this game, is to land the ship back on the planet so that these rocks can become part of the chain again, is what they call it, the hive mind. And I think that's one of the biggest metaphors I took from it is, besides the cloning, are you a human if you're a clone, or a person or whatever, is can you be a complete being if you're not part of a community or a larger group than yourself? Is being alone worth living, I guess?
That's
not at all.
That's pretty interesting. Well, I would say that they kind of mentioned this in the game where they are being killed off by the rocks, but they don't think that the rocks know that they're doing it.
Right.
They make the not metaphor, but I would say simile. Whereas if you were sick, your body is killing off the cells without you really knowing that that's what it's doing, and they think that's what the rocks are doing on accident. They didn't choose to kill everyone, but that's just kind of like a defense mechanism from being broken from the chain.
Well, that makes it even more of a point, is that subconsciously, or without them even doing it, because they're separated from the community or their chain, it's a defense mechanism that kicks in. The life outside of the chain isn't even possible. They have to do that.
And
I think.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just about to say, and they don't really, I think, realize that they are actually killing these people because they don't understand the idea of like actual individuality of not being in the hive mind.
Well, yeah, they don't.
Because as a human being, we have our own personalities, our own defining characteristics of what makes us us. Comparing to the rocks, they are all one thought, and they have all one purpose, and they don't get that when one person dies, they lose that specific person, and you can't get that back anymore.
Right.
But it's interesting because at the end of the game, the person who's been the actual person that you were a clone of has 3 personalities inside their body. No longer do they consider themselves one person, because in one of the terminals they say, I don't know what it's like to not have these 3 people inside of me. I'm neither one of them, I am all 3, and I'm one, or whatever it's called. But at the end, when they swap with the head watcher, and after you land the ship, you walk past 3 rocks, and 3 of the things that the rocks say are very similar to what the 3 people inside that one body had said. So
I think they're actually verbatim from the last conversation they had.
Exactly. So did those rocks just become into an existence, or were they just added to the chain? And did they ascend? So I don't necessarily know if I agree with the death thing, because it almost acted like they're more than that now. But I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. It got into some weird territory for me when I ran across the 3 rocks that were clearly the 3 personalities that had gone into one body. Because then I'm just thinking, I'm going, okay, that's awesome, but what does that mean? I'm already trying to piece together all of these different deep philosophical thoughts on this topic, and then I see 3 what used to be people are now a part of the Watchers, and so now I'm wondering if all of the rocks used to be people that somehow ascended into this, other state. What did that mean? I don't know. I got a little lost.
Right.
I think it has something to do with specifically, again, they're trying. Okay, hold on. Let me preface this with, there are 2 different endings. I'm pretty sure most of us chose the ending where you choose to fall into the hole to kill yourself.
I didn't, but I'm glad that Josh did in the playthrough, because I went back and watched it.
That was a tough decision.
Oh, man. It was for me, too. I sat there, I'm going, oh, man.
Well, set the scene for everybody, because I don't know if that gave it justice.
True.
So what happens is you land on the planet, or more like you crash land on the planet, and then before you crash land, you get a message from the ship that you originally were on before you ended up on this like space station saying, "Hey, we got your message, emergency beacon message. We'll be there in like 13 hours." And so you wake up and you end up outside, and then a little ship lands on the other side of like this like valley to which it separates you and the guy. So there's essentially this giant hole separating you two. And the guy is not allowed to let you on to rescue you because apparently your DNA is all messed up for some weird reason. It's probably something to do with the swapper. Like you've become super like advanced for some reason or another,
or just super different, and they
super
want
different.
Yeah, super different.
and they have to.
And they don't have a quarantine on the ship
Right.
to try and quarantine you, and so they just say we're gonna leave you, and they turn around and start walking away, and it freezes, and it says you can either hit E to stay on the planet, or you can swap bodies with them, and you have to pick whether or not you want to stay on the ship and not stay on the ship, but stay on the planet and die, or swap and go on living. And it reflects the decision that Chalmers and Dennett had made, that, in other words, instead of dying right there, they would swap into the brains and basically starve to death, but they would have enough time to try and find a way out.
Right, and it's the idea of do what you have to do to survive.
Right, so it's do you do what you have to do to survive, or do you let yourself die? And they both had said that they wish that they had died, but that the choice was already made long ago, and so it doesn't matter anymore. And so you take what they said to heart and jump, or do you do what you have to do to survive and swap with that person?
I think you can even go so far as to say the choose the swap is the individual answer to it, where you're, as an individual, you're doing everything to survive. But then the other answer is to jump and kill yourself. It's more like for the greater good, so that this doesn't keep going on and becoming worse, if that makes any sense.
When you jump off the cliff, as you're falling, it goes into the weird fuzzy.
You pass rocks.
Right,
as you fall.
so you're actually passing rocks as you fall, because it's a big empty pit. And so what I assumed was you were actually almost ascending, much like Dennett, Chalmers, and the Scavenger did, because I don't think that there are any rocks falling with you in terms of gravity. They wouldn't be falling with you either.
I think it was you were able to hear the conversation that was going on while you were falling to your doom.
Right, and if that's the case, I figured that you would almost be ascending. But if you swap with them, they have this conversation on the ship, which is also just as interesting. The woman doesn't recognize you. She thinks something's different, but you don't say anything.
Yeah, and the other guy's like, "What? He's not different. It looks just like him."
Which is exactly like a dude answer, and I was like, yeah, I wouldn't notice. But they talk about the chain and the chain being broken, but then after you crash land, they say that the chain's complete. And a couple of the forums that I was reading online, where people were asking, why didn't you do everything that the Scavenger did? Because every clone that you make of yourself does exactly what you do. And the answer that I kind of came up with that seems to make sense is that once when the Scavenger adopted the other two personalities into the same body, it was technically a new separate person. So there was no one for your clone to kind of mimic. And so it's just like the terminal said, I'm neither those three people. I'm just one, and I happen to be comprised of all three of those minds. And so that's why I think that your clones followed you, but you weren't forced to follow the Scavenger's clone.
Well,
what's cool is that it kind of ties that back into when you crash land and then you're walking past all the rocks saying, "Oh, hey, the link's been brought back together again." But they have the comment of, "But something's a little bit different. Something's changed slightly because of Dennett and Chalmers have been added into the hive mind." To which then they bring that back even more when you're falling. Dennett and Chalmers are essentially having a conversation with the hive mind, saying, "We have to save this person," and they don't understand like what they're talking about. Like, what is dying? What do you mean by that? And then they explain it in kind of a way how they can understand it is, if we lose this person, we lose that knowledge. And because the hive mind is all about just the idea of every single one of these entities shares the same knowledge, and so I think that was brilliant of them to add that in. Of now we've now added our own knowledge to the system, and let's see if we can save this person because this person also has knowledge to give to the hive mind.
Yeah, they did talk a couple of times about not understanding death and not being on the same kind of plane of existence where we're human and we experience things through the senses. We can see them, hear them, smell them, taste them, and they are clearly don't talk to each other. They communicate through telepathic communication, and they don't see things because they're rocks and they don't have any way of perceiving that dimension. But yet they're still, are they alive? Are they not? I mean, who's to say?
And they bring up a point in some of the terminals. They're like, they're rocks. They can't feel emotions and they can't speak to each other. But they said, what's the point of being able to not necessarily feel, but if you were in pain or you needed to say something, if you can communicate telepathically, then you would never need to express it. So one of the arguments were they're just rocks. There's no way that they can be intelligent. The other one was maybe they're super intelligent and they don't need to do anything other than be a rock.
Right.
You just blew my mind.
I wrote down the plot of the game on, in some of the descriptions while I was playing it, and it's kind of funny to read back, which is why I'm going to read it. But I wrote, I resumed my journey on the ship Theseus to try and send the talking rocks back home with an army of clones and a device that can swap souls. And I go, this actually sounds pretty ridiculous. Like, I've never written the plot down, but it's actually, I mean...
I read that description on the video.
Right. I mean, it's weird to put it down, but the game is so much more than just that. And I think that's what they were going for. It really is a really cool game.
And that's kind of the thing. We're sitting here talking about it, and somebody could just go, that sounds stupid. But then when you're playing it and you're actually involved in it, I mean, this is one of the games where, and I hate this... I hate this argument, by the way, but this is really a game that adds to the statement, video games are art, and I don't like that statement. I prefer to think of games as entertainment, because that's what they are to me. I don't really see them as a form of art. They are a form of expression, so I guess that's art, but this game is really, I mean, I would go as far to say it's a masterpiece. I mean, it's really that polished. I mean, the puzzles in the game are challenging, and some of them are really frustrating, but they're all
they are.
But they're all built on that one mechanic. You have a clone, and you can swap control to that clone, and then all that they do from there are, instead of adding extra mechanics for you to use and get around places, they add restrictions. And so they add the blue light, and they go, well, okay, you can use clones and you can swap around, but if you're in the blue light, you can't make a clone, but you can swap to a clone. And then they add the red light, and they go, okay, well, you can't make a clone in red light, but you can swap to a clone that's already there. And then they add the pressure plates, and then they add the gravity. And that's
wait. I thought the red light was you can make a clone in there, but you can't swap to it.
Right, Marshall.
That is.
You said it backwards.
Oh,
it's
did
okay.
I? Oh, okay.
But you said the blue clone correctly, and then
Okay.
you just kind of
Then I repeated
And then
it.
you repeated that again.
Right.
Sorry.
But then even better is, which is kind of clever. I didn't really think about it until much later when when you turn on and off lights. Is they added what was essentially a purple light, which was
red and blue
You couldn't
combined.
you couldn't do either of them. But I didn't really think about that until you literally had to turn on and off lights at certain points where if the beams would actually intersect, they would actually create the purple light, which was like essentially a dead zone, which I thought was fantastic.
Oh, that's funny, because I saw that, and the first room that it comes up in, I'm like, oh, purple light, clever, red and blue.
Yeah, that's what I thought too.
It took me a little while to kind of really think about that because I was just like, all right, shit, I can't. What am I supposed to do here now? I can't do anything in it.
Way to go and just bring our intelligence level down, Marshall.
That's what I loved about this game, though, is that gameplay-wise, it was a complex system that challenged a video game player, and then it was layered inside of a very philosophical environment and story, and as Caleb said, masterpiece. So it was the best of both worlds of this in-depth, complicated, challenging game inside of a intellectually challenging story. That's why I loved it.
Yeah, and I mean, for maybe the fans of more leaning towards story and not really the biggest fans of puzzle, I don't really know how to recommend the game, because you really would love the story part and the philosophy behind it. But some of the puzzles, if you're not a fan of puzzles, are really challenging.
You send them a
They
link
will
to our
make you
YouTube
feel
page.
stupid.
That's what you do.
Yeah, I mean, I spent a whole hour on literally. I mean, I sped it up when I put it on YouTube, but I spent a whole hour in just one room.
Was
and
it the one with the 4 pressure plates and the gravity?
everybody.
That one
Everybody.
is
That
hard.
piece of
45
shit.
minutes.
I am so proud to say that I didn't look up a single walkthrough for that game.
I didn't either. It was hard. There was not that puzzle, but I think it was the last one that I had to do, which I don't really know how to describe it. But anyway, it was very hard, and I was so tempted to look something up because I'm just like aching to beat the game because I've been playing for a couple hours. I'm like, oh my god, I just want to get done. I want to see the end of this crazy story, but I didn't do it. I knew that I would hate myself if I cheated. If I cheated
Marshall
on the puzzle.
and I cheated.
You did?
Yep.
Oh my god.
I had to. There was okay.
I lost
it was
so much
that
respect
one
for
with
you.
the.
Yeah, seriously.
It was okay. It was that pressure plate one, and then one other one, which I was literally like this close, and you can't see me do it, but I'm like little itty bitty little spot where I'm this close to getting it, and I was like, I know exactly how to do it, but I'm just missing one little piece, and I can't do it. And then I looked it up on YouTube, and I'm like, well, I feel really freaking stupid now.
See?
My lame excuse was that I didn't know that if you had a clone, one on the ground and one on the roof, you can jump and they would
intersect.
Because if
and
you
could
touch your
absorb.
clones, one of them goes away and it gets absorbed and you get another clone. And I didn't know that. And so as soon as I saw that in the video, I was like, done. I know what to do now.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I figured that out, and I mean, but when
That
I
was a
played
hard
through.
puzzle.
When I played through on the speed run, that was one of the fastest puzzles. I mean, it's just one of those games.
Yeah, once you get the mechanic of that one, it's just wrapping your head around it all. And they impose the other restriction that was very clever and evil is the fact that they'll have a room that has a 1 or 2 or 3 pressure plates to get
So
into
you
the room,
lose-
so
you
that you
lose
lose
two
those
clones.
1 or 2 clones, and thus restricting the amount of clones you have to play with. And so it's not a game that builds on mechanics. It's one that takes away from it. It gives you one mechanic that's awesome, and you can clone 4 times or have 4 clones out, and then they just restrict you from that point forward. And it's brilliant.
The one that you had to lose 2 of your clones to get into the room, I hated that one so much. I literally had to take a break because I was in just pure frustration. It cleared my head, came back to it, and I thought about that. I really just looked at it and went, oh, I figured it out, and I did it. And I'm like, oh, great, I feel stupid again.
Yeah, that one was hard also.
Speaking of game mechanics, I know this is going off on a little tangent, but who else thought the map was awesome?
Oh my
I
god, yes.
love the map.
The map
was
was
cool, man.
great.
You could scroll around to wherever you wanted to see, and it highlighted like teleports, it highlighted orbs that you hadn't gotten yet, and it was a clean map that encompassed everything that you had already discovered.
It was clean and not cluttered. I mean, well, which is the same thing, but it was minimalistic and beautiful.
The only downside with the map is that there are 10 secret terminals, and to get to those terminals are ridiculous, and that's how you get the achievements in this game. There are no achievements for getting every terminal that you can see on the map. There are 10 secret terminals that are hidden throughout the entire game that require you cloning through walls and things like that, or cloning what you think are walls, and then walking in the dark to the right for like, I don't know, 10, 15 seconds, and then coming upon a room. And
Wow.
I think I'm
I
going to...
Did
Oh, you
not,
did? Wow.
I didn't find a single one.
I didn't find a single
I
one.
didn't know that existed.
two
I didn't think this
playthroughs.
game would do that to me.
I think I will play it a third time because you can't backtrack. Once when the game is ended, you have to start all over. But I think I will record me just getting the achievements.
I'm definitely going to go back to it then, because I saw the achievement list and it's just Roman numerals 1 through
That's right. It tells you
10, I think.
nothing.
And it doesn't say anything. The name of it is the Roman numeral, and the description is the Roman numeral. And I thought it was chapters or something, but then I beat the game and nothing happened. I'm going, well, what are these achievements? But that
What
is
is that
that is
for?
awesome. I'm definitely going to go back to
Oh
this game.
man.
then.
Corey, I'm surprised that you found 2 of them. Did you accidentally find them, or did you just
This
know?
game, I think my exploratory game style is like went full effect. Like I went, because you can literally make a clone that's like touching the ceiling.
Yeah,
so I would
and
make
teleport
clones
up.
everywhere and like see if I could go other places. And the two that I found were in some sections of the map just have like large pits on the bottom that you don't ever have to really go to.
The electric one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if you go down there, if you go to places that you think you don't need to go to or that the game allows you to pass over, those are the places that I found them. Like I went all the way to the bottom and all the way to the left, and you go down a ramp that's hidden and you walk into a new area. And then there was one where there's like jungle-y forest stuff. I don't know if you can call that because it's in space, but it looks like plant life. And one of them was hiding a secret door that I went through.
Yeah, I mean,
I think I know what room that is too.
I watched the walkthrough online. There are a couple puzzles where you actually have to complete the room, and then when they turn off all of the lights, because when you complete a room, if there are red or blue lights or anything like that, the lights are actually turned off. And there are a couple levels where there's a pit and it's full of blue light, so that way if you were to fall through, you're going to die because you can't make a clone inside of the blue stuff. So once when you grab the
what room you're
orbs,
talking about.
Exactly.
yeah,
Oh my god.
if you go down where that pit is, because the whole time you've been dying going into that pit, so instantly you think, I just got to get out of here, and you leave. But if you go down there and look around or go to the corner or something like that, that leads you to another secret terminal. I mean, they've really hidden them throughout that game. Yeah.
That's really cool. I am so going back to this game then.
This is like braid level secrets. Like that game was just weird.
But the other thing I wanted to say about the map too that I thought was really awesome is anytime that your perspective changes, especially the
map changes.
Yeah, the
too.
map rotated with you, and so it could get super disorienting, especially if you're doing the like outside space zero gravity stuff, and you're like, oh, okay, wait, which
I loved it.
Which door did I come from? And you flip up the map and you're going, oh, this doesn't look right.
This looks way different. Yeah.
I floated around in space for a long time.
I did too.
Yeah, I had fun with that too.
I love how it just zooms out and it just shows you and just having to go in space. And I actually died a couple times because I wanted to see how far away I could go. And then I was like, oh, there's an asteroid field.
I did the same
I did the same thing, yeah.
I saw the asteroid field. I'm like, I don't think I should go that way. But what's funny is the first time I went out into the airlock and into space, I'm like, wait, how do I move around? And I literally sat there for I sat there for 2 minutes like, I know this is going to be really simple. I'm going to feel really dumb again. And then I'm just like, I'm hitting buttons. And then I finally decide to hit just the normal mouse click. And then I push myself with the gun. I'm like, oh, that's how you do it.
Yeah,
I don't know whether it was my
I
don't know whether it was my TF2 rocket jumping that made me think of it, but like I immediately thought about it.
Yeah, I didn't immediately grasp that one either. I was like, okay, so is this another philosophical thing where I have to just make clones to bridge the gap and then leave them stranded in space? And then I figured out that the swapper pushed you.
Speaking of the no gravity, what did you guys... There's this one room where you turn off the gravity, and it's really close to the end, and it's filled
And all the
with
bodies
all
float
of
up?
bodies.
the
Oh,
bodies.
yeah, that was weird. That was really weird.
That was the one place in space or like low grav that I didn't just like zoom around in.
I was
just,
trying
like,
to avoid the bodies.
Me
I did
too.
Yeah, I just felt very uncomfortable and just...
Because I actually found myself being afraid of what would happen if I touched one. I was like, am
Yeah.
I going to absorb it as another clone? What's going to happen? I don't want to touch it.
There's actually, close to the door, there are two of them that are hugging and floating in space. Like, that was the only screenshot I took of the game, was that one. But I didn't know if those were the people that were killed off from the actual Theseus, or were those clones?
You don't know, because every
Yeah.
single character model looks exactly the
It's
same.
all the same, yeah.
I think those were
Hold on.
actual crew members because they aren't anywhere else.
I think they were as well, but I don't know.
Guys, random thought. The Greek mythology of the guy pushing the rock off up the cliff. His name wasn't Theseus. The project name that they were doing, the scientific research, the name of it, whatever the hell the project was called, they called it that guy's name. That's where it was from.
The research
The
in this game?
Yeah,
Oh.
the whole scientific research that space station was for. It was for a specific project. The project name of it. That's what it was from specifically.
What's the name?
That's why I remembered it.
was
What was
I can't remember.
How do you
That's the
know?
problem.
It started with an A or something like that.
Because I remember looking
Atlas?
it up afterwards. Cause
No, Atlas held
No.
the Earth.
Yeah. It's the only big dude with a rock I know of.
And I thought, because I looked it up because I'm like, it kind of reminds me of Greek mythology. And I remember looking that up and I'm like, that's hilarious. Because then all that research just gave it the metaphor of they're literally going to fail this research.
Is it the
even
Greek
though
or
they're
Roman
going to try.
god? Because it's Sisyphus, and that wasn't in the
That
game.
wasn't in the game.
Marshall, stop trying to bring in Greek
I swear to
mythology.
God, it's there somewhere. I swear to God.
Just
I'm
because
going to look
they
it
both
up and I'm
have
going to find
rocks
it.
doesn't mean they do the same thing.
I swear to
And it's
God.
self-fulfilling
There's a
prophecy.
reason why.
But
I had
yeah.
a pet rock, and I think this game had a lot to do with pet rocks. No, Marshall, it didn't.
Shut up.
But
I will find it and I'll prove you all wrong.
well, you do that.
How about that? Okay.
This game was awesome though. I mean, I sat down and when I first started the game up, and it just kind of starts, just loads, and then you just got the little noises when your cursor runs over the different options that you have. Doesn't play a song, but it just makes little noises and everything about it, and just throws you right into the atmosphere. And I'm just going, man, this is a beautiful game. It is really, really awesome.
Who else played with the volume really high?
I
I
turned
mean,
it up.
I was wearing headphones. I don't listen to where it's uncomfortable to hear it, but
Yeah.
I mean,
I had it on my speakers and it was filling the entire room.
Yeah, I just
wanted that atmosphere.
I just played with headphones, and it was the same thing. I mean, I've turned it up maybe a little bit more than I normally would, just because I knew there weren't going to be giant spikes of explosions and other sharp, piercing noises. So I turned it up a little bit more to enjoy the background music that was gorgeous, but it wasn't a room-filling speaker sound.
yeah.
All right. Well, do you guys want to? This is on the fly here, audience. But do you want to end these game clubs with your recommendation of whether to play the game or not?
Yeah,
Sounds good.
I think you should, yeah.
I definitely like that.
All right.
I think this is probably going to sound like a resounding yes, you should.
I'll go first, but yes, definitely.
Marsh?
Yes, I would highly recommend it for people who like a good puzzle challenge.
I want to say yes, but by the time you've listened to this podcast, I feel like you've already passed that point. It sounds bad, but I think this is one of those games where you really just need to experience first and then listen to this. And by this point, if you've already sat through basically 4 hours of me standing around not figuring out how to solve this, then you're not going to get the game. And so, I hope you enjoyed watching it, but 100% you should play it. And if you have a friend that played it and they recommend you play it, don't let them tell you anything about the game. It's much better to really just experience the game and to not know what's going to happen.
I like how your disclaimer is at the end of our podcast.
I messed that up too in one of my descriptions on YouTube. I wrote, "Don't read the description," and I was like, by the time you got to this, you've gone too far
late.
into it. Well, basically, so if you haven't played the game but you listen to this podcast and you recommend this game to someone else, don't tell them about this podcast until they finish the game.
There you go. That's the proper way to
you.
win them.
It's up to
Nice.
you, listener. Yeah.
I agree with that. I mean, even having spoiled just about everything about the story and everything, I still think that there's value in buying it for yourself and playing it. And it's not that expensive. And I'm sure that Steam, in all of its stealing money wonderness, will have a sale of it again, and you'll be able to pick it up for even cheaper. And I highly recommend it. I think that the experience and the gameplay is definitely something that you should experience as a gamer and a philosophy major or whatever. But it's highly, highly recommended.
All right, so that's a resounding. You've already played it, but recommend it to a friend. A yes. So I guess we can end on that note. I'm Corey Trout.
I'm Marshall Behringer.
I'm Josh Gianni.
And I'm Caleb Jones. Thank you guys so much for listening to our very first Game Club episode. We will be bringing these to you every other Thursday. And check out our Facebook page and our other podcast for the update on what game we're going to be discussing next. I believe we're going to try and get a YouTube Let's Play of the entire game, but depending on what game we play, maybe a little too long for those. But anyway, stay with us on our Facebook and Twitter for constant updates. That's facebook.com/randomrespawn, and YouTube is youtube.com/wearerandomrespawn. Thanks again, and we'll catch you soon.
All right, I'm ready. Are we gonna do this?
Ready.
Yep, we're goody.
We're goody. Who says that?
We're goody. I'm goody. I don't know about you.
We're all
I
goody.
didn't
I'm
mean
goody.
to say that.
I'm cool. I can do it. Don't worry.
All right, good. I'm just gonna start.
The project name was Sisyphus. I was right, bitches.
It was Sisyphus.
Really?
Sisyphus.
It was Sisyphus.
I totally
I
skipped
was
over that.
right.
All right.
Why did you say that right after we finished recording?
That'll be our little quip at the end, okay?